Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, 100% OpEx NAS Backup with Zadara and Veeam. People are still coming in and getting settled, so we're going to give them a minute, and we'll get started here shortly. Thanks. All right, why don't we get rolling? Again, welcome everyone. Today's webinar, brought to you by Zadara and Veeam, is 100% OpEx NAS Backup with Zadara and Veeam, no surprise. And what we're going to talk about today is how to create an infinitely flexible 100% OpEx Veeam-ready NAS backup solution. Let's take a look at who will be presenting today. I'm very pleased to be joined by Steve Firms, Global Alliances Solutions Architect at Veeam. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Greg, how you doing?
Very good, thanks. Steve Costigan, Senior Director, International Solutions Architects at Zadara. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Greg. Hi, Steve.
So we've got a terrific panel here today for our audience. Let's take a look at what we're going to talk about. My name is Greg Newman. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Zadara, and I'll be the host. I'm going to hand it off to those two gentlemen for our substantive presentation. I want to take a minute here to provide a few remarks. First of all, let's take a look at what we're going to be talking about today. You'll see that NAS backup can be complicated. We're going to find out a little bit about that, and we'll find out a little bit about how using Veeam might simplify things for you. We'll take a look at some of the wonderful features in Veeam, including change file tracking. It's pretty cool. I think you'll like it. And then we'll look at how, when you combine Zadara and Veeam, you get a wonderful combination of features and functionality in a very convenient 100% OpEx package. And then, just to have a little icing on the cake, we're going to go beyond NAS backup. And we're going to talk a little bit about some other backup considerations and some other things you might want to be thinking about as you're putting together your backup strategy. And of course, we'd like to hear from you. And so we're going to have time at the end for questions and answers. If you have questions at any time during this presentation, please do go into your control panel. And there's a questions panel right there. You can go ahead and type your questions to us. We'll do our best to answer them. In fact, we have people standing by answering questions throughout the presentation so that you can get a prompt response to your query. With that housekeeping out of the way, let's get started. Steve Costigan, let's talk a little bit about NAS itself and give our viewers an understanding of what it is.
Thanks, Greg. So yeah, I think, if we look at NAS, it's been around for a long time. It's utilized as, the central repository for many organizations. It's still the central access point for, a lot of Office files. It's being used more and more for things like data analytics, and it's very much the point whereby we're providing a scalable, or not necessarily infinitely scalable, but a scale out capacity whereby, as we store more data, typically these systems scale on demand. They deliver a set of performance because typically they're used as a single function. They're not doing multiple different things, and they're generally easy to set up. Many NAS environments today are running on appliance-based solutions, or they're delivered in a way that Zadara may do with its VPSA technology. And the key here is that it's about providing a simple and accessible environment that also provides a level of fault tolerance, because people are creating this data. It's important that they're able to utilize high availability, and we may be using things like RAID, replication, snapshots, etc., to ensure that data is available to us. However, there's some other key elements in terms of, by having this simplicity, by having this availability, it provides a level of vulnerability. And we're living in a world whereby ransomware attacks and the instances of ransomware attacks are becoming more and more prevalent. But if we look at NAS and the way that NAS has been attacked, it's not so long ago that we look at the WannaCry ransomware attack that had a devastating effect here in the UK on the UK NHS, and there's been more attacks on that same eternal blue type vulnerability from Microsoft Windows environments, the NotPetya attacks, and more recently, only last week there's a new vulnerability out there around Windows SMB3 and the potential vulnerabilities there. So we have to find a way of ensuring that if our systems are vulnerable, that we've got a recovery mechanism and that we're able to detect and do something about that. So what is it we're looking to do? Really, we're looking to provide a unified NAS backup solution. Again, organizations may have different vendors. They may have Zadara, they may have Windows, they may have NetApp, they may have various different NAS subsystems, and each of them may require a different way to back them up. And really having a unified model with a fast recovery and a fast backup time that doesn't need antiquated solutions really is where we need to head to in the modern market. And as we look through what Zadara and Veeam is providing, we're saying here, let's deliver this as a 100% OpEx model, because we don't know what's going to change. We don't know whether the environment is going to scale locally. We don't know whether it's going to scale in the cloud. And therefore, having this ability of, regardless of whether you're on premises or in the cloud, you're having a unified backup solution that you pay based on what's needed, where it's needed, but also having the ability to utilize offsite copies, is really, really key in protecting these environments. And really, this is the crux of really where we're seeing the changes in the market space and what Veeam are particularly bringing into this market space. And at this point, this is probably where I'd like to hand over to Steve Fermes and to talk about the Veeam capabilities.
Thanks, Steve. So definitely going to talk about the new NAS capabilities that we've come up with in version 10. Those who are familiar with Veeam may be saying, well, Veeam's always been able to back up NAS. True, but prior to version 10, we were relying upon the NDMP protocol, and certainly had some limitations. So when we came up with our new NAS backup, we designed it around particular features that our customers required, as well as stuff like Steve just mentioned, the ability to scale, the ability to send data to different copies on site and off site. So that's where we see our scalability, the vast support of all the different architectures and protocols that we can do, and as well as partnering with our friends like Zadara, integrating with their NAS snapshotting, as well as using their object integration. So now, going through this, when we talk about this enhanced NAS, there are some key components that we want to build around, right? Certainly flexibility. As I mentioned, our customers have extremely diverse and complicated environments, so we need to be able to support all of the common NAS protocols, as well as Windows file servers and Linux file servers. And when we developed this NAS backup, we wanted it to scale, right? So we needed to have the ability to back up petabytes of data and billions of files, but more importantly, to be able to do these backups fast, right? It doesn't make sense with the scale and stuff that to have backups that take a weekend, right? We need this stuff to get done fast. And we talked about snapshot friendly. So certainly with the VPSA, we can integrate with their snapshot technology so that we can eliminate those object locks and progress with the backup faster and take it offline. And lastly is the restorability, right? We want to be able to certainly restore the entire file share, but what about doing a point in time, right? So if there was a ransomware attack or a failure and you need to go back to a particular point in time, we give you that ability. And certainly the file level recoverability, which was not available prior to this. So real quick, I'll go through the Veeam NAS backup architecture. And as you can see here in this slide, the VPSA can be a source certainly. it can be, a backup target initially. We also have two other repository types I'll talk about, the secondary and archive. But if you notice in the slide, the VPSA is across the board, so end-to-end solution. So the first component, as say with the NAS backup, is you need to have that source. So again, all the different protocols and windows and file shares that we support going forward. Next is our file proxy. So the file proxy is the mechanism within that it's the Windows-based appliance, if you would, that will actually do the backup. This is the one that's going to go and take the data off of the proxy and send it to the target. Great thing about these proxies is they can be dynamically allocated. So they can be virtual. So if you were to do, let's say, your first full backup, probably going to use a lot more proxies than you normally would. You can fire up a bunch of these, virtual proxies, go through, do the backup, and then retire them. The next step is our cache repository. So this is, it's a repository, but there's no backup data there. It's just going to be the metadata. So, this should be on a high disk platform so that, when we do these, fingerprinting and lookups that I'll explain, it needs to be fast. It should also be as close to the NAS share as possible. And by this, I mean is, you wouldn't want to have your VPSA in the US and have your cache repository in the UK. You want to have it close. And we also have, if you go to our website, we have plenty of tools out there to help you size them. But rule of thumb, we're approximating, this is about 5 to 10% of your data size. So the first target is our backup repository. So those familiar with Veeam, this is where we back up our data to. And as I mentioned earlier, a VPSA is a wonderful target for this. This is where you want to store your most recent NAS backups. Typically, we've been seeing customers, keeping data here, with a 30 to, maybe 90-day recovery. This is where, you want to get that production data recovered first. It's certainly, it's a regular Veeam repository, so it can be part of a SOBR, one of our scale-out repositories. And again, the VPSA, it's a wonderful target. Something new with version 10, those again familiar with Veeam and our .vbk and .vib files. This is a new file. This is a 64 meg blob file. So, it does behave different than our typical virtual machine backups. The next repository is our archive repository. So, this is where you're going to send your older files, again, to a lesser expensive. And again, this is perfect. Again, the Zadara VPSA using their object storage. This is a wonderful, wonderful platform to target that archive repository. Next, we have our secondary repository. So this is a copy. So this is where, in case of a DR, business continuity, this is that second copy that you're going to want to have in a secondary location. So again, send your data, copy it out to the secondary VPSA in your secondary site. And again, it's a true copy of your primary site. Now, you can have, different retention settings. And more importantly, you can actually have different encryption keys. So, what would be great is a nice best practice is to have, a set of encryption keys for both sites. So in case one gets compromised, the other won't, or the chances are less. So now how do we do this and how do we scale this to be, again, that petabytes in size and billions of files, but still do fast backups? This is through our ability to do our fingerprinting or checksums on the individual files and folders. And what we do is as we said, that cache repository, we check, and if something hasn't changed, we skip it. So if you had a parent folder with a billion files underneath it and nothing changed, the parent folder is not going to change. So we don't scan all of the files and folders underneath it. We just skip it. Now I'll go through and I'll explain, the fingerprinting in more detail. So on the first day, we're going to do a full backup. So on this full backup, we're going to scan all the files and folders, create that checksum, which is the fingerprint, and we're going to store that in our cache repository in these vcache files. And that vcache file is what we're going to use, later on to interrogate the files and see what's changed. So day 2, we're going to do our incremental backup. So as I mentioned, we're going to hit the root first. Yep, something's changed. We're going to go to the subfolders. Yep, only folder 2's changed. go down the tree until we find that the file that we were looking for that had changed was file D. And so what's going to happen is that gets updated into the vcache file in the cache repository. And so that way, when we update that cache with this change, so what happens is that the next time we do a backup, that file D's updated fingerprint will be in our vcache file. So you can see, again, really quick how we're actually only doing a couple writes instead of doing the whole tree. So all this, backing up is great, but you really need to be able to restore it to make it a true solution. So with our Veeam Backup and Recovery console, you can certainly do restoration. You can do all the configurations there, but within here, it's kind of great. As you can see from the screen, right? As I mentioned, you can restore your entire file share. You can go back to a point in time, or you can do individual files and folders. You can also go to different locations. So, another restriction of the NDMP was, it had to go back. You had to restore the whole volume to the same location, basically the same device, the same model, everything. This is not the case anymore, right? You can go from, a file server and restore it to a virtual machine. It doesn't matter. And now we have our Enterprise Manager. So Enterprise Manager, it's a web interface that, if you're not familiar with it, it's a great tool for folks with distributed environments and for our service providers who have multi-tenancy requirements. So again, just like the VBR console on the previous screen, you certainly have your granular level of recoveries, but also you have in the Enterprise Manager, you have the ability to search, right? So you can do some searching for particular files and find and restore them. And also you can delegate the recoveries, as it says, to trusted users. So, this way, if in your organization you had a, someone who had to do the restores across multiple tenants, you could assign that individual or individuals authorities to do so. And with that, I'll pass it back to my friends at Zadara.
Thanks, Steve. So a key element here is obviously all this great functionality from Veeam, but where does Zadara fit into this model? Steve's highlighted some of the key components in terms of the VPSA can be an end-to-end capability here. So our virtual private storage arrays enable us to deliver NAS capability, NFS, SMB sources, but we can also provide this air-gapped isolated capability where we can deliver block-based VPSAs, that enable us to deliver an all SSD capability, such as that cache repository. Steve mentioned that it needs high performance. This ability to dedicate high performance SSD for that cache repository with isolation means that then we can have another virtual storage array that is the backup target that could be part of that scale-up backup repository that Steve mentioned, a combination of Zadara's block and object, to provide a true multi-tier capability. And then utilizing Veeam's archive tier capability to utilize our object for those long-term retention files. Why is this important? The reason that it's really, really important is block volumes and NAS volumes are getting larger and larger. We're storing more and more data. We're seeing typical customers now approaching that 100, 200 terabyte NAS volume requirement, and trying to back that up using older protocols like NDMP, it's just not practical, because we're talking days, maybe a few days to actually do that backup. And in a 24/7 operation, is that really a viable alternative, a viable backup mechanism for a customer? So this new change file tracking capability enables a complete new way of doing things, and combining that with Zadara's multi-tier capability, delivering this as an OpEx model really is a game changer in the market. And if we look at how we combine this for a 3-2-1 NAS solution, Steve showed this ability around the cache repository, the on-site repository, and that secondary copy. And utilizing our VPSA technology, utilizing our service providers, the VCSP community, they can be hosting that secondary copy inside their own data center. They can be hosting that object repository. And therefore, that gives you that offsite capability as well, if you don't have your own offsite environment in which you can model this. And if you're in an environment where you need to go a little bit further, and maybe that backup time is something that you've got to consider, then there's other alternatives. Zadara provides a VPSA mirroring capability based on our snapshots. And as Steve said, there's this capability around snapshots and offsite backup, which may introduce another capability. If you deploy a Zadara NAS environment on premises in your own data center, and then you use our mirroring capability to replicate that into one of our service providers, and then you utilize a snapshot, present that to Veeam. Veeam is then enabled to do that change file tracking, push that into the cache repository for fast indexing, push that into the backup repository for a further offsite copy, and then use the archive tier to take the previous versions for the longer term retention. Especially, as we look at some of the modern ransomware attacks, they're happening over a period of time. So, a 30-day retention policy may not be enough as we move forward. 60-day, 90-day, 120-a-day plus retention periods may become the new norm. And this is where we see some of our key service providers really adding value into this space. K3 Business Technologies have a high availability solution based up in Edinburgh, in Scotland, in the UK, stretched cluster VMware environment, but they're a key partner. They're able to offer Veeam-based disaster recovery capabilities, use the Zadara replication, combine that with Veeam. They can then replicate that to their other facilities, such as the one in Manchester, to provide a complete end-to-end solution that really offers a level of protection way over and above what most organizations can deliver on their own. And if we look at this combination of Zadara and Veeam delivering a 100% OpEx NAS backup, combining this with our VCSP partners enables organizations to have a multi-tier, multi-location capability that they probably cannot deliver and cannot afford by doing this on their own, and certainly not in a cost-effective way. So having the right partners, having a backup partner that's got the skills that's going to enable you to deliver data protection in the way that you actually need it to protect your data is really, really key as we move forward with these new threats. And if we look at some of these new threats, we see that there's a need beyond just NAS. And Zadara, we've partnered with Veeam to provide a number of solutions. Other considerations are Office 365 backup, that need to, as we adopt more and more cloud-based services, to still back those services up. But also, let's not forget, that traditional on-premises capability that's been the lifeblood of IT for certainly the last 20 years, VMware, Hyper-V, Windows, Linux, and also this ability to have the mobility of protection for on-premises and cloud environments. But also, let's not forget that there's a threat out there in terms of ransomware, and we need to offer an air-gapped solution to provide this 32110 protection mechanism. So if we look at that 32110 protection mechanism, this data protection zip code that Veeam have introduced, traditionally most organizations have talked about 321. Veeam have extended this through from 321 to 3211 to 32110. And it's important that you understand where we're going with this. 3 copies of your data, at least 2 different media types, of which at least 1 is offsite, and that is immutable or offline. But let's not forget about the recovery. you need to ensure that you are able to recover that data. You've tested that recovery. And this is really where Veeam and Zadara start to bring in a completely different way of operating. In our environment, we provide a very secure, multi-tenant, very efficient solution where you're able to decide what storage tier you require for different applications. So if that's a NAS environment, you've got a choice, SSDs or hard disk drives. Those hard disk drives can be cache accelerated. You can utilize our snapshots. You can also further have an all SSD environment that may be blocked. Combining that in a single platform with our object capabilities, you have an air-gapped with dedicated CPU cores, memory, networks, and drives. But you've still got to back that up, and you've still got to provide a simplified solution. And this is where we believe that Veeam and Zadara provide that scalability. We can scale at each tier independently and on demand. We provide an agility by you being able to utilize the correct tier, shift capacity as requirements change, whether that's into the cloud, out of the cloud, on premises, using service providers, but to do it with simplicity, i.e., a simple solution combining Veeam and Zadara, a single storage subsystem, a single backup subsystem for every single tier. Delivering that flexibility that as your business evolves and changes, you're able to evolve and change. For a service provider, that's critical. You don't know what tomorrow brings. For enterprises, it's the same. You don't know what tomorrow brings. We've gone through this pandemic situation that has created a massive inflection for many, many organizations. But we're also in an era whereby data sovereignty is still key. And therefore, having the choice of doing your backups on premises or via a service provider or into a cloud environment, you still need to be able to offer that choice. So with that, if we look at some of the solutions that we've brought together with Veeam and with the VCSP community, Office 365 backup, the Veeam backup for Office 365 provides a level of choice. Utilize Veeam and Zadara on premises as a 100% OpEx model, utilize a backup of that via a VCSP to provide a complete offsite copy with immutability to provide a complete end-to-end solution with air gap. And again, I'm going to stress that air gap capability because as we look at infiltration that's happening from ransomware, things, phishing attacks, etc., are on the increase. We need to provide a complete air gap solution between different tiers. And the other important thing here is that by utilizing a service provider or bringing it on premises, Microsoft don't charge egress from Office 365 out into your service provider environment or into your own environment. So this means that you're not paying for accessing that data in that way. And that's a critical part. So if we look at some of our key partners that are delivering this capability, Virtual DCS, a service provider based in the UK, have built this fantastic portal aimed around Office 365 backup, disaster recovery services. The ability to white label this. So if you're a channel partner or an enterprise partner, you've got this ability to utilize an aggregated platform that they've built with complete multi-factor authentication support, driven into what Microsoft is delivering via Office 365. You're able to deliver a self-service portal for your own restores. This means you don't have to wait for IT to be able to recover that file that maybe has become compromised, or maybe you've accidentally deleted 3 months ago. So, with this, how do we move things forward in terms of delivering a end-to-end 32110 backup with Zadara? And really, it doesn't matter what your production storage is, whether it's Nutanix, whether it's vSAN, whether it's any other storage vendor, or whether it's Zadara. We're able to provide a solution that can sit inside and alongside your existing infrastructure to provide an OpEx-based backup solution with Veeam. You can provide backup copies onto your own environment, or you can make use of the service provider environment and utilize Cloud Connect back into the service provider, who may be able to offer you additional capabilities around backup and disaster recovery services. So if you're a service provider and you want to utilize your VCSP licenses and deliver a complete end-to-end on-premises and off-premises solution, then really I'm going to point you at one of our key partners. So Vital is a service provider who's based in Ireland, and they are traditionally they're a telco, but they offer security services. They've launched a backup as a service and a disaster recovery as a service capability in conjunction with Veeam and Zadara. And by utilizing Veeam Data Labs, they're able to offer additional disaster recovery services around checking that you can actually do that recovery. And I'm going to harp back to that 32110 on that zero piece of testing that recovery. And really, in highlighting that model and how this looks, then the data coming in from multiple different sources enters into the VCSP via that Cloud Connect. They're able to differentiate based on different customer requirements. A shared tenant capability using Zadara scale-out backup repository and utilizing Veeam's multi-tenancy capabilities for those smaller type environments, but with all of the security that Zadara and Veeam build into their products to ensure that there's complete separation. And alongside that, there's this option of a dedicated tenant who may be a larger customer, maybe for regulatory reasons needs dedicated repositories from a Zadara perspective. And again, the VCSP is able to offer that. But it's not just about the backup, it's about that recovery. So combining this with Veeam Data Labs, the ability to use the Shore backup and recovery mechanism means that we can create a VPSA on demand. Only takes 90 seconds or so to create this new VPSA, present that up to VMware, and then utilize Veeam and Veeam Data Labs to create a restore point that is, again, completely isolated so that people can test their recovery during normal working hours, not across a weekend, not in the middle of the night. This is, again, it's a game changer for service providers. It's a game changer for organizations. And really, I want to then cover into one of our other key partners, SANS, based in the Philippines, a fantastic organization that's able to deliver backup, disaster recovery, archive services on premises, in a private cloud, via a service provider and the public cloud, and utilizing Veeam and Zadara to offer all of these additional functionality and capabilities that we believe is very, very unique in this market space. So the key benefits of utilizing Veeam and Zadara is this 100% OpEx, multi-tier, multi-location, multi-tenant capability, but with a simplified model, across all tiers, the ability to change your technology based on business needs and business demands. We have a number of our customers who have been with us 4, 5, 6 years, and they've just evolved. They've not had to wait for 3 or 5 year refresh times. I mentioned K3 earlier on. They've gone through a number of iterations from SAS drives to SSDs to larger SSDs, utilizing different tiers of hard disk drives. And this is a key component for a VCSP, combining a software solution with Veeam, with a managed service solution from Zadara, utilizing that and utilizing things like the Veeam unit, subscription licensing for a VCSP and universal licensing on premises, means that you don't have to try and figure what capabilities you need 3 or 5 years out in front, because you just can't predict it. Having this capability of a cloud tier, both on premises and via the service provider, again, is a key recovery strategy. So this provides this end-to-end, cloud service provider enterprise strategy to deliver 24/7, 365 managed service. And this is really where we believe, this is very, very unique in the market space. So if you'd like to know more, VeeamON is just around the corner. We have a booth at VeeamON. We've got some presentations coming up. But more importantly, we want you to come and talk to us. We want you to understand how we can add value to your organization, clearly around NAS, but of all of the other things that we've discussed here in terms of additional value, anti-ransomware, Office 365 as a complete end-to-end solution. So with that, I'm going to hand back over to Greg.
Excellent.
Greg.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate the presentation, and I'm looking at my clock. I see we have time for questions, which is great. We certainly got through a lot of material. I bet people have a few questions. There are a number of different and very interesting facets, I think you can see, to the way the Veeam and Zadara relationship works, how complementary it is, how if you're looking to put together a NAS backup scheme or strategy, there are a number of different ways you can do it, and Veeam and Zadara together give you the flexibility to do that. One of the key components, of course, and we have a question about it, is around the OpEx model. The first question we have is, when you say 100% OpEx, what does that exactly mean? And I am paraphrasing a little bit here on this question, but essentially they've spoken to other vendors, I guess, and it appears like those OpEx models are not necessarily truly OpEx in the sense that they are really just pay for what you use. Let's talk for just a moment, Steve Costigan, about how we do it here at Zadara, the OpEx model.
Yeah, I think it's really unique. I think I'll refer back to the GigaHome piece that has recently been released about us being this really the leader in this storage as a service space, because we're truly delivering a OpEx-based solution where you pay for the drives and the virtual controllers on a per hour basis. So if you create a new VPSA and you run it for an hour, you pay for an hour. If you then dismantle that VPSA, i.e. you tear it down, you stop paying for that resource at that time. So for a service provider, it means that you can offer project-based environments, especially around disaster recovery. We talked about the data labs, having that ability to create a new VPSA, charge the customer for the hour, and then when they finish with that, tear that down, stop paying for that. That is really, really unique. And if you compare that with a lot of so-called pay-as-you-grow models, not pay-as-you-go models, where Zadara is really, really different is that we'll enable you to scale up and to scale down. And if you look at most competing models, they allow you to scale up. And then when you scale up by about 10% above what your base model is, they then increase, they ratchet it up. We don't do that. Okay, this is a true pay-per-use model. And that aligns perfectly to Veeam's VCSP licensing and the VOL licensing, because again, it's a true pay-per-use model. And that's the real difference.
Exactly. Thank you, Steve. And there's a good follow-up question to that, I think. Let's use this as a follow-up. There's a question about multi-tiering. And I believe, if I'm reading it correctly, they're looking to maximize efficiency by taking advantage of different tiers. Can you talk a little bit about the tiering capabilities that we offer together with Veeam?
Yeah, I think the key element here is, each VPSA that we create is an isolated resource in terms of, there's dedicated controllers, dedicated CPU. Within that, we can allocate an all SSD pool. We can create a hard disk drive pool. We can accelerate that hard disk drive pool with, very large SSD cache. So you're able to utilize each of those tiers for different workloads. If you then look at that from a backup perspective, you're able to utilize that very fast tier for that Vcache repository. You're able to use the SATA tier or the hard disk tier for long-term backups. But then we have an object capability within the same platform that is again completely isolated, dedicated drives, and utilizing software components like what Veeam bring, and this ability for them to move the backups through those tiers as they're needed, and then us to be able to create a all flash array for a restore for the likes of data labs provides that true tiering capability on an application needs perspective. And we utilize caching because SSD cache on top of hard disk drives can provide a level of performance that you can't just get from magnetic media on its own.
Yep, exactly. And this is the kind of thing that we like to talk about with our customers and our clients, isn't it? The idea of bringing different technologies, of being thoughtful and intelligent in terms of your approach. And you can really only do that if you have those resources at your disposal, if you have a system that can accommodate those different strategies. There's a question I want to follow up with Steve Firms about, because it's another question about efficiency, and that is about the changed file tracking process. This question is that it appears like change file tracking is going to make an exponential difference in terms of the performance, the efficiency of the backups and the speed with which they can be done. Is that true? Steve Firms, why don't you take a moment to elaborate again on change file tracking? I think it has a huge impact.
It does, Greg. Thank you. That's a great question. Yeah, absolutely. We have seen, great numbers, a reduction in time of our customers when we adopt this, because like you said, instead of, having to scan through, a billion files and come up with, which ones need to be backed up, we can, go through that and interrogate and decide which files need to be backed up in a fraction of the time. So yeah, it is an exponential change. And like I said, it depends on the data, right? I mean, if you have a highly transactional file share where 80% of the data gets changed, yeah, it's probably not going to be all that great of a reduction. But if it's your typical site where 5% or less or 10% gets changed, it's going to be a monstrous change.
And that's a great point about really looking at your own environment, understanding what your needs are, and then tailoring the solution that's going to work best for your needs. And the point that was made at the top of this presentation about how needs change, right? The whole notion of having an OpEx model is, and we've all experienced it, and we're experiencing it with more frequency these days than ever before, is that our needs do in fact change, and sometimes in unexpected ways. So having that flexibility can be a huge benefit. A few more questions here. I know we have a little bit of time left, so let's do a few more. I see here a question about SAN environments. We've talked today about NAS. What about SAN environments? I know we talked a little bit beyond NAS. Steve Costigan, talk a little bit about SAN.
Yeah, I mean, SAN to us is part of our hereditary. It's where we come from. We provide block, file, and object capabilities in a single platform. So if you want to utilize iSCSI for block, present that to VMware, to Hyper-V, or even into public cloud providers such as Amazon or Microsoft, and even VMware in AWS, for example. We've got a great tech paper. I'm going to plug myself there because I wrote it, around utilizing Veeam and AWS VMware and providing a backup capability for those AWS VMC environments. So we're providing SAN capabilities on premises and off premises. We support Fiber Channel, we support iSCSI. We also support ISA. We've been one of the leading lights in getting VMware to support ISA as a protocol. We've been running ISA over converged Ethernet for 4.5, 5 years now, even before VMware's official support for that. So if we look at K3 as an organization, K3 Starcom, they've been running multi-VLAN, multi-tenant, with complete separation ISA VMware environments across a stretched cluster across 2 data centers in Edinburgh. So we're delivering at all tiers, and SAN is really, really native to our world.
Good point you made about technical information that's available on our site, and of course lots of technical information available on the Veeam site as well. I would encourage everybody on this webinar today, if you're interested to learn more, please do visit our sites. You'll be able to learn about how NAS backup works. You can learn about other forms of backup, and there are a number of different pieces of content that you can download or review on our site and on the Veeam site. So I would encourage you to do that. We have another question here about gateways. And I think the question, if I'm reading it correctly, is a gateway necessary or needed? Please enlighten us, Steve Costigan.
So no, gateways from us, I have a very clear view. Gateways are good where the subset that you're working with, is minimal. I.e., you don't need to recover all of that, because ultimately, if you're using a gateway, you've still got to pull it from somewhere in a restore. I would much prefer that you have a local backup that's able to do a full restore locally. And that's really why we have this on-premises capability, that we can use that as a full backup repository locally for Veeam, and then allow Veeam to do what Veeam does great, in terms of pushing that off to another tier, hopefully via a VCSP, because they've got all of that air gap and great capability. But I'm not a fan of gateways, because usually the problem with gateways is when you need to do a rapid restore and you don't have enough bandwidth, and you've got somebody tapping on your shoulder saying, can I have my system back up and running now? Okay, that's not a great place you want to be as a recovery manager of that infrastructure.
It's a good point. Obviously, you want to feel like you're in control, and you can't do that if you have those types of pieces in place. As we get near the end of our time together, I want to remind everybody, Steve mentioned this a minute or two ago, we are going to be at VeeamON. We're very much looking forward to this event. It's virtual this year. It's going to be terrific. We've been planning for it and working with the Veeam team. We just love what they're doing there and love what they're putting on. We think you'll really get a lot out of it. So please do come join us and come to VeeamON to see everything that's there. It should be a terrific event. You can see on your screen right now a little bit more information about it if you're curious, if you want to sign up, if you want to go learn a little bit more, and make sure you reserve the time. One last thing I'd like to point out we haven't talked about yet is how you might get started. If you're interested and you're ready and you'd like to do that, what can you do? We recommend that you come on over, check us out. We do offer a free trial. You'll find out a little bit more about that on our website. Or of course, you can contact us. We're happy to tell you a little bit more about it. And that makes it very easy for you to try out Zadara. And Veeam has similar policies. You can learn about that on their website. The idea, of course, again, like we mentioned earlier, is that you need to make sure that this is not just the right software for you and the right hardware for you, although we think it is, but that you've implemented it in a way that's going to be useful to you in your environment. And to that end, we have our storage architects and our expert team on hand to help everybody. Anybody that gets set up on our system gets our expert support as part of the setup process. And we think that's absolutely crucial because storage, as we like to say, we like to make storage as easy as possible here, as simple as possible. But there are still some complexities to it. Let's not kid ourselves. And we all know that. Those of us that manage storage for a living understand that. And we take our obligation very seriously to be your assistant and your support behind the scenes, looking over your shoulder on an ongoing basis. And that starts right at the setup. Okay, I'd like to thank our two expert speakers, Steve Firms. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Glad to help, Greg.
Steve Costigan, wonderful to have you again on the webinar with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Steve. I enjoyed it again.
To everybody who's joined us, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. We will be sharing a recording of this event afterwards, so if you want to go back and listen to anything, you can. And again, if you have questions or interested to learn more, we encourage you to visit us on the Veeam website and on the Zadara website. Thanks, everyone. See you at the next one. Bye-bye.